welcome back to my channel. If you have just found me, I am Anastasia Mili, a watercolor artist from Australia. Welcome, and I'm very glad you're here. As many of you know, I normally post painting demonstrations here. I do it every Sunday, but a couple of months ago I tried making more chatty vlog style videos, and this is now my third video like this. They have been a bit of a learning curve as this introvert is still finding her feet in front of the camera, but I think I'm getting there. I loved sharing a bit of a behind the scenes to my studio life with you, and thank you for all the lovely comments that were left on my first two vlogs. I really appreciate all your feedback and questions. In this video, I want to share with you some of the things that have helped me find growth in my watercolor practice over the last few years. I have a lot of thoughts on the topic, so I think this will probably become a series of videos, and I would like to tell you both about the technical skills and my mindset when it comes to watercolor. And I will start with the evolution of my mindset, because I believe that the attitude that we approach our creative practice with is very important. Plus, the right attitude actually helps develop your technical skills faster. And as I always say in my videos, whatever I'm talking about here is just my opinion. I'm simply sharing my experience. These are not the shoulds, these are just some random thoughts that I would like to share with you after quite a few years of painting in watercolor. First of all, let me tell you a quick backstory of my creative journey, because it is quite relevant to what I will be talking about later. I have been painting and drawing on and off since I was around 11 years old. I took art classes when I was a teenager. It was like an after-school activity that I did for a few years, probably around 5 years. And those classes became the foundation for my art practice, which I'm very grateful for. There I started drawing, oil painting, also pastels, and of course watercolor, which was already my favorite all those years ago. Then I stopped painting when I was around 16, and I didn't pick up any art tool for around 10 or so years. And then over the course of the next couple of decades, I would occasionally feel the call to come back to my painting practice, but I never actually had the time or the drive to fully immerse myself in it. I was always busy with a lot of other things that young people do. I also found photography, which I fell in love with, and I did for many years, and I still do it. And since those art classes, I have never really done any like proper art courses. I do not have an art degree, so I am largely self-taught. I did attend some classes as an adult. I think back in 2008 or 9, it was at my local art society in Sydney. And there wasn't much actual tutoring happening there. They was just set up a still life for us to paint, but there was no real feedback or guidance, just some very gentle critique at the end of each painting session. And I also attended a few acrylic painting workshops, like semi-abstract landscape painting, which was fun. I really enjoyed it. But I can't say I learned many new things over those years. So I basically just relied on the old knowledge that I had back from when I was a teenager. So finally, around 7 years ago, after another decade of not picking up my brushes once, I felt the pull to start painting again, and I also actually finally had a bit more time to spend on it, and I have been putting a lot of effort into it ever since. And I chose to come back to watercolors, not oils or acrylics that I also used to do quite a bit, because I have never ever felt a stronger connection to any other painting medium. They're just magic and absolute joy. And I honestly felt like a complete beginner, despite having that previous painting and drawing experience, that limited foundation that I had. And the biggest growth in my watercolor skills has happened in these last few years, just by painting on my own, also painting quite a lot. And looking back on this journey from painting when I was a child and all the way until now, there are a few things that I would like to share with you. about what has helped me grow as a watercolor artist and helped me develop my watercolor practice that has made my life so much richer in so many ways. Probably the biggest, most helpful, most freeing thing that allowed me to find my way to a very enjoyable painting practice is the realization that there are no rules in art. Instead, there are helpful principles that we can choose to follow if they work for us. Throughout my life, I have always been a bit of a rule follower, nothing wrong with that, but I feel that sometimes this can actually manifest as people-pleasing. And I feel that people-pleasing while making art is a dangerous way to lose my connection to creativity and my authentic artistic self. I did collect quite a few limiting beliefs while trying to study art, during those art classes, and later when I was coming back to painting from time to time. And I never really questioned if whatever I was hearing or reading would actually be applicable in my own creative practice. I just blindly accepted them as rules, those things that I read, that rules that everyone should follow. But once I started focusing on painting a bit deeper and painting a lot, I started to realize that there are no rules, just those principles that I can choose to apply if they benefit my own creative style. And here are a few examples of the things that I accepted as the rules I had to follow to be a good watercolorist. That I needed to stay away from heavily granulating or opaque colors, or they would muddy up my watercolor washes. That I had to stick to a limited palette and have like no more than 12 single pigment colors in my toolbox, or I wouldn't be able to create harmonious color schemes. That I should mix my own greens using blue and yellow, that I should paint large as small paintings have no value, etc., etc. But eventually, just by painting a lot, I figured out that all these rules are actually limiting my watercolor process. So I started breaking a lot of them and have had a ton of fun doing it ever since. Granulating colors are my favorite. Opaque colors play a very important role in my landscapes. My palette has over 50 colors. I love convenience mixes, and I absolutely adore making small paintings. I know now that the only person that needs to be happy with my art is myself. I use whatever colors or whatever techniques or tools without thinking that someone somewhere would judge me for it, like I used to think for some reason. Like, for example, my use of a ruler when I paint boat masts. I get a ton of comments about this technique because I think some people believe that real artists must be able to draw a perfectly straight line by hand. But this is not my belief. I think a real artist is someone who answers their creative calling, makes art for the sake of making art, and tries to convey what they feel through their work using whatever tool they want. And I no longer feel the need to impose any limits on myself. All I need to do is just to follow my own joy, my own curiosity, free myself of someone else's shoulds, and paint for myself instead of trying to please others. I think my inner rebel comes out quietly but fiercely when I'm painting, and I also protect my work like a mama bear. But I think who I am actually protecting is my inner child. The next thing that helped me find growth was realizing that I needed to paint for the process and not the end result, and this was huge. And I know that if I have a pre-visualized plan in mind when I sit down to paint, I often get attached to that plan. But guess what? Watercolor has a mind of its own, and that can very easily take me away from that plan. And if I let go of that visualized idea of how the finished painting should look like, if I keep an open mind and work with what watercolors offer me, I actually end up with a better painting that somehow carries more emotion, as it is a reflection of what I was experiencing and feeling when I was making it. It's a story of the journey of that particular scene. And my favorite landscapes are the ones that feel like they came out of nowhere, the ones that surprised me or took me in a complete opposite direction to what was pre-visualized by me at the start of the painting session. I think when we are beginners, we often actually do not have the skills to paint how we want to paint, and our initial attempts can sometimes disappoint us even. But once we sit down to paint just to paint and not to produce a pretty picture, we actually open ourselves to something new, and we invite a completely different, curious energy into our process. And it's all about play, experimentation, failing, and learning from those failures. And I also think that we as a society are quite results-oriented, final polished products-oriented, but to me that doesn't really work for my creative process. Life is full of serious and heavy stuff already, and my painting practice offers a place where I can get away from the noise and just play with my paints like a little kid. And interestingly enough, once I stopped trying to paint a pretty picture and started just trying things, following the playfulness of my watercolors without being attached to the outcome, then I actually started getting the results I was happy with. And I love reading books about the creative process. They really helped me put whatever I was feeling about my own creativity into words. And those words gave me the confidence to keep making art the way that felt the most authentic to me. And they highlighted the importance of the art making process itself over focusing on a polished result of that process. My most favorite book on the topic is Trust the Process by Shaun McNiff. I highly recommend it to anyone interested in the topic. I actually bought it years ago, but I never really had the time to read it until around 2021. So it was like a gift from the artist me in the past to the artist me at the current stage of my creative life. And this book has really helped me propel my watercolor practice forward and strengthened my confidence in my own creative expression. I have also read many other books on creativity. I will mention them in the description. And I think it is actually time to reread this one. It has been a few years since I did it last time. I always find something new that resonates and that can help me during the current stage of my creative life when I reread this book. I've read it many times now. If you have your own favorite books about the creative process, I would love to know about them, so let me know in the comments. The next thing that has really helped me grow and is closely linked to painting for the process is trusting my watercolors and letting them flow freely. I do not try to wrangle watercolor into something I pre-visualized. When I start a painting, I use a lot of water and a lot of paint, and then I just set the colors free in that wet wash. Then I build up on all the wonderful textures and effects this creates for me. And it's kind of like a dance of two partners, really. First, my watercolors lead me in that playful initial wash when I let them go wild. But then I take over and I guide them into helping me create a landscape out of that abstract wash. And I remember I used to be quite timid and careful with my brushwork, but now I love just throwing the paint on the paper and seeing where my watercolors take me. Plus, it's also incredible fun. So I always aim to stay open-minded and curious when I'm painting, and this has helped me discover a lot about the way watercolors behave, the way they mix on paper, and how to get lovely color transitions, etc. The next thing I want to mention is failed paintings. Embrace them. I have piles of them. They are very important and not a waste of paper. They have actually taught me much more about watercolor than my successful works, as I figured out what helps and what doesn't, thanks to them. Plus, there are two sides to watercolor paper, so I use that other side to color swatch or to try new techniques or new color mixes, new color schemes. And then the failed painting becomes even more valuable as we learn a lot from those experiments. So failed paintings are a natural and necessary part of the creative process, and I never beat myself up for them like I used to when I just returned to my art practice. I simply just chuck a failed painting attempt at a landscape into my scrap paper pile, and then I use them for some really fun experiments. Another very helpful thing for finding growth for me was switching to just the subjects that I was drawn to painting the subjects that I was drawn to, that I loved, as this motivated me to keep going. So remember I mentioned those art classes I attended at an art society in Sydney where I had to paint still lifes. It was actually the time I realized I wasn't a fan of them at all. It was also partly the reason why I stopped going there. I still find still lifes really boring. I do understand their value as they teach a lot about shapes, the way the light wraps around an object, how to simplify complex objects like flower arrangements, for example. And I also love looking at other people's still lifes, but I just don't want to paint them myself. I'm drawn to landscapes. Also, I have always been drawn to landscapes the most in my photography as well. So it is definitely a subject that inspires me the most and the one I want to paint. And painting what brings us joy actually makes us paint more, I believe. And by making more art, we will inevitably find that growth. Moving on to the next thing. Critique and criticism. I value critique when I ask for it, because then I'm actually looking to learn from the people I look up to. But unsolicited opinions about what my art should look like no longer influences the choices I make in my creative process. And over the years, while sharing my work on social media, I have received comments like, I shouldn't be adding so many birds to my landscapes, that my paintings are too messy, that they are not realistic enough or abstract enough, etc., etc. But again, I paint for myself. I will paint those birds into almost every painting because I love birds. I also love bird watching with my little binoculars and my Australian birds guides, and also with my telephoto lens. And I feel that birds bring a lot of emotion to a scene, and they also help balance my compositions in a powerful but subtle way. And I prefer messy, playful, imperfect, but expressive art. I do not want to create something refined. I want to paint something that makes me feel deeply. So I do not listen to that criticism of my imperfect, messy art, because we all have our own ideas what perfection looks to us. And when I stopped listening to other people's opinions about my art, I started trusting myself and my watercolor more and more. And I feel that this has helped me find my own way, move in the direction I want to go, and make the art that makes me happy. And also, I stopped comparing myself to other artists. I believe there is zero joy in it, but I do compare myself to myself. So when I look at my old art and the art I make today, I do see a lot of improvement. And this is actually what's important, what matters to me. So I think this is all I have to share in today's video. And in the next one, I will be talking about the evolution of my technical watercolor skills and which ones I think have made the biggest difference in my painting. And as for my studio life, I don't really have much to report. I haven't had much time to paint lately. We had our winter school holidays here in Australia. I also was away in Tasmania for a bit, so I will leave you with a few gentle scenes I captured on my camera during our trip there. It's one of my favorite places to visit in winter. And I hope you enjoy those views as much as I did when I was there. And as always, if you have any questions or thoughts, I'd love to hear them in the comments. I hope that whatever you're working on at the moment is bringing you lots of joy. Thank you so much for watching and happy painting! I have also been knitting quite a bit. So this is my new sweater that I finished yesterday. Not yesterday, a few days ago, but it's finally dry after blocking. So this was fun. Just another way to express yourself creatively.